Welcome back. You're watching Business Week here on Arise News. I'm joined now by Ubah, who is Chief Investment Officer, VNL Capital Asset Management, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Good morning, Ifeanyi. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year
Always
to you.
great to have you here on Business Week.
Likewise.
Yeah, I mean, it's only the third of the year, but quite a lot has happened already. So let's begin with silver topping $80 and then reversing sharply. What does this tell us about current investor sentiment and market stability?
Well, the silver story is a geopolitical and geomacro story to put it together. So we have seen silver become one of the most valuable assets, even beating Nvidia and just next to gold. Top performing assets throughout the year. But the story behind this rally is a story of China waking up to the importance of silver in the whole global supply chain and production capacity. Now, there are two major exchanges. The one in Shanghai and the one in the US. And mostly the one in the US is more like paper contracts, right? 10% of the value of silver there is usually is what they hold in their vaults, while most of their contracts are rolled over and settled in cash, so they don't really need to hold the silver. The next exchange that determines where the price of this market is in Shanghai, in China. And this holds and controls the physical delivery in gold, in silver. Now, what we saw over the past weeks is that there was almost $7 arbitrage between this market, showing that people are demanding more of that physical silver. And that's because China is waking up and saying he will place embargoes on the export or even control the export of silver, which is a precious metal. Now, the elasticity of silver is something to consider because the demand is continuing to increase, increasing almost 50-something% in the next decade, because silver is an important conductor for your laptops, for your EVs, even for powering the whole AI infrastructure. But yet, the supply of silver is very minimal because it comes as a byproduct of mining other minerals. So the elasticity of this means that it can shoot up in price in any instance. And China is coming to the recognition of this and holding it back and saying, okay, we need to control this. And I've only approved almost just 44 companies to determine the export of silver, making the arbitrage much and shooting the price up. But let's not get confused. China has a good reason for doing this. China's infrastructure, China's economy was based on silver. It was actually silver backed in the 1930s and the 1940s. And what they noticed is that when the US woke up to the importance of silver and made the Silver Act that demanded large purchases of silver back to the US, they saw their economy crumble because of disinflation. So people started thinking that, oh, instead of me buying this today, let me just wait and prices will drop. So the silver that is supposed to power the lifeline of China became a destruction to it. It's not as if silver failed as an asset class, but China realized that if you are using a resource that other countries can manipulate, they would manipulate it. So this is China stepping up, and this is not the first time they have done it. They have done it for rare earth minerals. And with the demand of silver, there are some analysts that are even saying that it could outpace gold, even though I feel it's far-fetched. For the traders listening, we all know the silver-gold ratio. When silver and gold ounces going to 80, it's time to sell. When it's around 40, it's time to buy. But around this time, it's around 60. So even if gold has increased so much, silver is still fairly priced. So the people sitting down, if you bought silver at the beginning of the year, you're up almost 160%. Take profit, but I don't feel you should make the bulk of your portfolio, because just as it rallies, it also has a huge history of retracing back. And what happens in the silver market happens very fast. And it begs the question, when is Nigeria and Africa are going to wake up to the importance of commodity? Because even if you have the currency, can you buy the resource to make your factories, to make your industrial sector? The importance of silver is so much that Elon Musk even tweeted about it, saying that this is a big deal.
I think that's a very important point you've highlighted in terms of waking up to it. So basically, that China's awakening has had a huge multiplier effect globally.
Yes.
But the question you just asked as well, when will Nigeria do the same? Would you say that, of course, there's always another question, like in terms of shelf life. How much longer do we see this happening? This awakening has happened with China now. But in terms of 5 years from now, is this a commodity that is going to be just as competitive?
Definitely, even 20 years from now, given where the world is going. So if we look at technological wise, we are still looking at bringing more technologies in humanoid robots, Tesla. So who knows, in the next 20 years, I might actually be talking to a robot presenter. Who knows that? And we need a lot of silver to make this happen, because silver is the perfect metal conductor. But this is a very volatile world. We could see a scientist come up with some new invention that could change the game. But for now, it has become an essential mineral. Even the United States also made it a mineral of concern.
All right, so hot commodity silver right now.
Yes, definitely.
Let's look next at the CBN targeting 16.5% inflation in 2026. Now, given current inflationary pressures, how achievable is this for 2026?
Yeah, so the headlines show 16% and a deep dive into the qualitative for the CBN. CBN released a recent outlook and kept around 12.5%. Yeah. But either ways, when you look at the wordings of their outlook, the CBN is actually in tune to what is happening, right? So one of the things they said was that the base effect is about to end, and they could see resurgence of prices, right? Because if the base effect is about to end, that means the rebase effect, the reason why we saw a massive drop from 33% was because of the rebasing of the inflation. And once the base effect ends, we will stop seeing inflation trending downwards. Now, the recent inflation figures opens the light to that even more. We see core being persistent and food now resurging. Now, mind you, the CBN has done wonderfully well in controlling the monetary policy and stabilizing the exchange rate. But one thing they have failed to neglect is to try and support the infrastructure that brings food into the economy. And food inflation is even becoming more dire. In the analysis and risk assessment, food inflation is something that could have a high impact on the general economy. So with the resurgence of food inflation, because there are no the CBN has not done anything structurally. And it's safe to say, Kadaso said it immediately began that he was going to look away from developmental finance. But with the state of the economy and the climb that Nigeria is in, looking away from developmental finance might mean people have to pay higher prices and the CBN rebattling inflation. So whether it's 12% or 16%, inflation is going to resurge.
Absolutely. And you're saying that, of course, infrastructure is key, as we all know. In terms of the efforts that the governments have been making so far, do you believe there's a silver lining to support this push towards dropping the inflation level?
Oh, definitely. There has actually been some silver linings, right? So, especially the fact that, a huge portion of it, a huge gain in inflation is the fact that CBN has been able to stabilize the exchange rate. And we have seen even the consumer goods services of the stock exchange market has outperformed. We have people like even the industrial sector, because they have also seen some value add due to the stabilization. MTN, for example, is one of the great stories of stabilization of exchange rate and reduction on inflation, because Nigeria is heavily import dependent, but we might sacrifice the little gains we have had if we are not very granular in our policies.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move now to the talk of the day. And I'm talking, of course, about the new tax laws and the kickoff. Of course, President Tinubu has insisted on January 1st being the tax law kickoff. We're the third today. Let's talk about the likely economic and business implications of this implementation without delay.
Okay, so to be honest, the tax laws comes with a bit of pros and a bit of con. Okay. And as an economist, I'm forced to think about the opportunity cost, and I'll get to that. But for the pros, right, this is actually a beautiful bill, right? It takes into cognizance the informal sector, and it's something that I hold dear because I did my thesis on that. And it also promotes financial inclusion, right? So getting people to get their tax IDs and getting people to register and be online and have BVNs and other things to make them documented is an important thing that the tax rules now force many people to do, and in order to do business in Nigeria. So kudos to that, right? So another thing you have to understand is that 98%, according to NDIC, stat data shows that 98% of Nigerians have less than 500,000 in their bank account. So it puts the majority of Nigerians in the non-taxable bracket. But those are the pros. Now let's go to the cons. That has to do with the 2%, 1% of Nigerians that actually have some bit of funds in their bank account. So the tax laws, personal income tax, company income tax, nothing too crazy there. It's really good. But what is cause for alarm is the capital gain tax, right? It moved from 10 to 30%. And what we saw was that at the highest decline, the stock market was sold off around 6 trillion, close to 7 trillion. And given that last year, the entire revenue generated from tax was 8 trillion. So just because of this kind of balloon increase, it has scared off investors. And the truth about it is that if you're looking for an economy to reach 1 trillion, if you're looking for an economy to grow, you need people that make very, very bold decisions and very bold investment into the country. And capital gain is a huge compensation. Take Dangote, for example. Nigeria has been struggling with refinery problems since inception, but it took Dangote to look for syndicate loans and invest heavily in the infrastructure of the Dangote refinery. Now, Dangote refinery is going to come to the Nigerian Stock Exchange and even open it more, be one of the most highly capitalized stock markets. So if Dangote wants to sell a piece of his investment, of his capital in 2026, he will have to pay 30% tax. That is, to me, like you're punishing somebody for doing something great. The truth about it is that few men get to position themselves and drive others. And those capital gain is a reward for this, right? Taxing them too much without creating the infrastructure that helps that capital gain. Because we saw Dangote, he came out online and saying he's struggling, both from regulations, different bottlenecks, because it's not easy doing business in Nigeria. So if you're going to tax me equivalent to the United States, at least try and provide similar services. And if you're not, why don't you open it up so that more investment can come in and it becomes an economy that can tax like that. So other than the capital gain, I think it's a tax law that should be applauded, right? But I know that the tax authorities said they were going to look into the capital gain taxes, but we have not seen anything fruitful from that. If they can make that tiny adjustment, this could be one of the best tax bills in the entire African continent.
So in light of the pros and cons you've highlighted, it sounds like the pros are outweighing the cons, with the hope, of course, that there is room to make certain adjustments, right?
So depending on who you ask.
Depending on what side of the fence you sit on, of course, it's going to favor some people and not. We don't have so much time. Let's finally look at the bank's NPL ratio rising to 7% after forbearance. Let's talk about that. Does this rise in non-performing loans signal deeper stress in Nigeria's banking sector, or is this simply a temporary adjustment?
Well, it's supposed to be a temporary adjustment, right? And given that the banks are doing their recapitalization, is safe to say they could take the hit and continue to grow further. But the problem is that it keeps them on a vulnerable spot because there are also black swan events. Yeah. What if there's another COVID or another geopolitical tension that disrupts the economy of Nigeria? It means the banks might not be able to safeguard their capital or go to financial losses. And even the fact that it is already above the threshold of 5% might mean that it will eat up into the profitability and earnings of these banks, or even make them more fearful to lend to the market. So all in all, it's majorly going to try and stress the banking earnings. But if the economy continues to boom, we could see that it's absorbed. All
right. So, of course, there's also room there based on knowing what gaps need to be filled. If you joined us midway, I've been chatting with Ubah, who is Chief Investment Officer, VNL Capital Asset Management. Ifeanyi, I want to thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you here, and we'll see you again very soon. All right.